Modern Eater Network production. Hell yeah. Let's get this party hopping. No more milling around. Get ready to have a mash ton of fun. Here are your hosts, Andrew Moore and Jeff Tyler.
Hey everybody, welcome to Beercraft. I'm Andrew Moore here with my co-host Jeff Tyler of Spice Trade Brewing. It's 4 o'clock on a Monday, which means you are not working. You are on Facebook watching Beercraft. And we are here on the third week of our World Beer Tour, traveling the world in no particular order as it turns out. From Belgium to Germany. This week we are in China.
Yeah, globetrotting a little bit.
Yeah, which I'm really excited to get out of Western Europe. I mean,
so Western Europe,
I love their beer.
Yeah,
that's where beer is from.
And
but
so
I'm excited not to be there.
Yeah, I agree. And just kind of to let our viewers know, we're live at the Studio Kitchen, Colorado, home of the Modern Eater Network. We are live on Facebook. We encourage you guys to get on the video, ask us some questions. We're happy to throw them up and chat about them on the show. But yeah, we're going to be in China today, and we've been in Western Europe. And I think a lot of people. I mean, there's obviously a lot of history and culture in Western Europe with regards to brewing, beer, and alcohol in general, and civilization. But I'm excited to kind of shift gears and go to China because it's such an unknown sort of part of the world for most people. People think beer, they think German and Belgian beer in Europe and some English cask ales. But I'm excited to kind of dig into a totally different culture than we've really been talking about so far in Beercraft.
Yeah, well, and I believe, some of the work that Dogfish was doing with Patrick McGovern, the professor out of the University of Pennsylvania, and some of the work that other people are doing on ancient beer like China is actually where our oldest evidence of a beer-like beverage comes from, right? 9,000 years ago, beer-like beverage. There's some debate about, when is it beer, when is it not beer, right? If it's, partially honey, if it's partially this, partially that, is it really beer?
Yeah.
But our closest sort of beer-related beverage, 9,000 years ago, picked up in China.
Yeah.
Have you had the Chateau Jiahu, the Dogfish Head Chinese beer?
No, I have not had it.
Yeah. It's it's got grapes and I think orange blossom honey. It's most of the fermentables, so it's kind of sweet.
Was it fermented in a clay or bronze pot of some sort?
I don't know. You have to ask Sam about that.
We'll have to get him on the show. I called him last week. I was hoping he'd come on, but he's busy with some merger. I don't know what's going on.
What are you busy with? What's Spice Trade busy with?
Oh, we got lots of fun stuff happening at Spice Trade. We're still kind of working on this new brewery project, which will be opening up late fall this year. Very exciting stuff for us at Spice Trade, getting to expand a little bit and sort of open up this flagship location down in the Denver Tech Center. So we're working hard on that all summer long. We have tomorrow, Tuesday, July 23rd, 5 p.m., right here where we're standing right now, is going to be the Modern Dinner Summer Dinner Series. And we're going to be pairing a bunch of our beers with some food that Carly Smith, the Fairy Gut Mother, is putting together a really impressive menu. And it's all focused around gut health, probiotics, prebiotics, and kind of digestibility. And I'm super excited. It's one of the more unique pairings that we've gotten a chance to work on. We're going to be bringing our Limoncello Saison. We're going to be bringing our Cucumber Mint Cream Ale that we're actually going to be making a probiotic mojito cocktail with, which I'm super excited about. And then we have a brand new beer, which is a collaboration that we've been working on for a while with Alex Liberati, who we've had on the show before, of Liberati. It's an NO beer, so it's a wine-beer hybrid, but it's designed to taste like vermouth, which is an Italian digestif, a very bitter fortified wine liqueur. And it's typically had at the end of a meal as a digestif to kind of help you digest a large meal. So we have that spaced throughout the meal. And that I'm super excited about. We just spent most of the day Sunday finalizing it, blending it, getting it into some bottles. We're serving it still, and we're going to be kind of releasing it at the dinner, and I'm excited to see what everyone thinks about it.
Oh, that's nice. That's nice. I will not be at the dinner. I'm not allowed. Jay said I'm too rowdy.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't say that, but it is a full dinner, so it's like I mean,
Is it sold out?
if you're comfortable,
It's sold out.
it's super sold out. Is what
Not even for insiders, industry insiders like yourself. You can't even sneak in the back door and wash dishes.
Well,
Can you wash dishes?
Well, see, that's what I'm saying. So, like, if Andrew is comfortable with just walking around and acting like he's got a seat somewhere, but technically doesn't, he can be that guy.
Key now. I'm just coming in.
Yeah, that's true.
Oh, great.
Yeah. So, well, no, that's awesome. I'm excited. I'm excited for the vermouth beer. You guys have been talking about that a long time.
Yeah, we've been working on it for a while. It's a tricky thing to get right, and I'm excited about how it came out. And we got some cool plans for it. So I'll have to bring some on the show next week. We could try it out.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. So what's going on in Intrepid Land? We were just over there a little while ago trying some fun new stuff you guys have on tap.
Yeah, we just tried our hand at hard seltzer for the first time. So we did a passion fruit and a cherry version of a hard seltzer and released that this last Friday, and that was a lot of fun. And yeah, I mean, it turns super sessionable, like 3% ABV, just a little bit of fruit, real nice, effervescent. I think, when it's 96 degrees outside and they force you to sit on the patio because it's Colorado, it's a good thing. It's a good thing to have.
Yep.
We've got a whole sort of slew of good, exciting beers that I'm excited about coming out.
Nice.
So this Friday we have strawberry, cucumber, lemon. This is a pale ale with those 3 ingredients. The week after that is our Blue England. It's a New England IPA with blueberry and vanilla.
Blue England.
Blue England.
Blue England IPA.
Blue England, yes. Blue England, New England IPA with vanilla. Yeah.
Tongue twister.
I'm excited about that one. And then 2 weeks after that, I know I'm getting out here, but we finally got our Easter Island yeast grown up with Inland Island.
Yep.
And we've been working on coming up with a beer that sort of represents the area where we got the yeast from. And we're releasing that on the 19th of August. I'm really excited about that.
Any sneak previews on what those ingredients are, other than the yeast, which you actually captured from Easter Island itself while you were there?
Yeah, so the island is covered in guava. So we've tried to incorporate some guava. And then also, the trip involves Chile and South America as well. So we tried to incorporate some of the wine tradition from that part of the world. So I wouldn't call it an NO beer by any stretch of the imagination, but some of those flavors playing in there. So I'm excited about that.
That's going to be cool. I mean, playing around with wild yeast yeast can be one of the most important ingredients in a beer, and when you can really find a cool strain of yeast from an interesting part of the world and figure out how to express its flavors, that's a pretty, you talk about sort of rare opportunities. We were talking about this a little bit before the show started about, what gets people excited about beer. I think that's amazing because that's an ingredient that no one in the States has really had before, a yeast that's been captured from Easter Island, brought back to Colorado, and then put into a beer. So I'm excited to see how that turns out.
Yeah, I'm excited. I would love to have just like a yeast cooler full of like international yeast.
You have like a map, and it has little holes and little vials, and you like pull them out depending on what you want to do.
It looks very supervillain-like.
Oh yeah, we get a little brewery cat, and a nice big chair with high arms on it.
Yeah, just like it was an Inspector Gadget.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, I'm excited. We've got Sean Guerrero with us today of Jade Mountain, and like I said, we are in China. We are live on Facebook, so if you have questions about China or Chinese beer or Jade Mountain coming to Denver very soon, throw it up on Facebook, and we'll get to it over the course of the next 45 minutes or so.
Yeah. John, thanks for coming on the show. Thanks for spending your Monday afternoon with us.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, for sure. So you Jade Mountain, if our viewers haven't heard of Jade Mountain, tell people a little bit about what Jade Mountain is and sort of where you're not open yet. You're very close. You were telling us before the show, really close to opening, but not quite there. How long do people have to wait?
We're aiming for the end of August, maybe beginning of September.
Great.
Really close.
Yeah.
Almost there.
Nice.
Been waiting for a long time for this. But
yeah. How long have you been working on this project?
this one, almost 2 years.
2 years.
Yeah.
Wow. And what does Jade Mountain specialize in? What kind of beer can people expect, and what kind of experience can they expect when they come to Jade Mountain?
Well, I guess a lot of it has to do with the background of Jade Mountain. We started in 2015 in Huzhou, China, and we started in a small little tea house. We utilize a lot of local ingredients for our beers, teas and fruits and spices, and I really want to bring those flavors back to Denver. and introduce people to flavors they may not have had in a beer before.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So I just imagine you, and I would like immediately romanticize it, right? So I just imagine you like going to the market, right? Which I probably picture as like an old-fashioned market that I saw in a movie.
It's probably really like Walmart. No.
But like,
There is Walmart.
I just like baskets, baskets of dried flowers and berries and roots, and you're just like, oh, what am I gonna brew today? Like maybe some of this. Like it smells fresh. Like, what is that?
There's a lot
Tell
of
me
it.
that's the process.
There's a lot of it like that. I mean, there are certain areas where you do have those open air markets where you can go and pick and choose whatever you want to use in your ingredients. But the cool thing about these small cities in China is most of the stores are specialized in like one single thing. You got these guys who do tea. This guy does Chinese medicine. This guy does, sells wood or whatever else. Mm-hmm. So you can really easily find what you're looking for just by going in each individual place. And these guys are masters of what they do.
Right.
And they know everything there is to know about tea and Chinese medicine. And a lot of them are really curious about what I'm doing. They're like, why are you here? Why are you buying all this tea or all this weird ingredients? And, it's exciting. It's really exciting to use something new like that and just not have an idea how it's going to taste or if it's going to be good or not.
Yeah.
And more often than not, it turns out pretty decent, I think.
Nice. It's interesting. We talked a little bit sort of last week when we were in Germany and the week before in Belgium about this generational knowledge that goes into beer. And kind of what you're talking about is sort of this generational knowledge that goes into the other ingredients that you're going to then incorporate into the beer. Are you able to sort of learn any of that from these masters that you're getting ingredients from and use that information to help you brew a better beer with?
Yeah, well, so there was an old tea master who was 2 doors down from the brewery, and he really knew everything there is to know about tea. And I would sit down with him about 3 hours every day. I learned Chinese from him, but yeah, he would teach me everything there is to know about this particular tea, with the flavors, how to drink it, and how to utilize it in, other things. So the flavor profiles, he told me that, really got my brain turning to see, okay, I can use this beer or this tea in this particular beer or this other tea in a different type of beer. And just really, it's pretty cool to really learn those type of things. And you don't really get that just by drinking it by yourself. You have to have somebody to say, okay, this is how you're supposed to do it. Yeah. And, you can learn some cool things.
It's kind of funny. It's the same way with beer. I feel like when you're, you're a certified beer judge. You've been through the BJCP process. I've been through the same, and I feel like it's the same thing when you're kind of trying to learn styles and trying to learn off flavors and things like this. It's one thing to read about it or just to sit down and try to figure it out yourself, but it's totally different when you go to a class and somebody who's very experienced and it can sort of guide you towards those flavor profiles and help explain to you what's what.
Yeah, because that's the thing. I feel like you're always learning. We were talking about this a little bit before the show too. But obviously we can all like taste and smell beer on our own. But like oftentimes you go to these places, you learn the vocabulary, right, for talking about it. And it's like, and it's kind of a group vocabulary, right? So we're all on the same page. You brought this delicious jasmine lager that we've been sipping on the show. We're talking about how like the flavors of jasmine, right? Like there's a little bit melony and a little bit like floral, and floral just seems like like it's just not exact enough, right? It's
it works.
Well, yeah. It's, all chamomile is also floral.
Yeah.
Hibiscus is also floral, and yet they're like 3 very different scents. And I feel like that's where a lot of that comes in. And it's just, you probably do this at Spice Trade, right? Where you're like, someone comes in, they're like, oh, I'm a tea company. We want to put more tea in beers. Sit down and try 18 different teas with the tea expert.
Yeah.
It's not in China.
Well, it helps, though.
It does help. The ambiance, I imagine, yeah.
Yeah.
It's better. You learn faster.
We've done the same thing with the Boulder Tea Company where we'll go up there, we'll sit down, I'll spend 3 hours opening up every bin that they have and smelling things and talking to the tea people about what they use it for and what they like about it, what they don't like about it, and take a bunch of stuff back and see what sticks, Try to mess around with it.
That's the way to do it. A lot of experimentation.
Yeah. Yeah, experimentation. And tea is one of those ingredients. It's steeped in tradition, right?
Yes. You got some tea trees that are, thousands of years old. These same tea trees, they've been harvesting them for generations, and it's amazing.
Yeah.
And it has to do with, climate and, the location and altitude, just kind of like coffee, very similar.
Coffee and grapes.
And grapes,
wine.
yeah.
So so tea trees, can't grow them in Colorado, that's what you're saying?
I guess we could. I mean, I don't know. I'm not sure if anybody is here growing tea trees. I guess I don't see why not.
I feel like you'd need one.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Yeah,
I'll grow
it right next to my hop
grow
plant.
some tea trees at the house, and I'll keep you guys posted on how they turn out.
I love it.
Yeah, awesome. So I imagine a lot of that experimentation from China is coming into Jade Mountain.
It really is. It's actually more experimentation here than we had in China. So the hard part about China is there's not much craft beer in China.
Right.
And even though it's the largest country consuming the most amount of beer out of the whole world, it's mostly those light macro lagers. So the most popular, most sold beer in the world is called Snow, or Snowflake. And it's just a light 3% lager, and they use it to rehydrate after drinking the hard stuff. And it descended from Germany. All the Germans came and they traveled and traded, and they started breweries in a lot of the coastal cities out there. So a lot of those beers have a lot of history from Germany. The yeast, the styles of lager brewing, and the hops as well. So it's really hard to experiment in weird things, even just like an IPA or a sour.
Right.
They're not used to those types of flavors. They're used to beer being light, easy drinking. I could drink a whole case of them in a sitting.
Right.
So it really took a lot of work to brew beers that people would be willing to try, and I gave a lot of beer away. Just say, here, try this, try this, and see what people liked. And out there, it's kind of how America was maybe 30 years ago, switching from macro lagers to bitter IPAs, West Coast style IPAs.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where they're at. They got the West Coast IPAs and like a Belgian wheat, and that's pretty good out there. So I did feel kind of stifled in some of the things that I would want to brew.
Right.
So I brewed lots of stuff like mixed fermentation, sours, and just interesting things. I just wanted to brew all kinds of crazy stuff, and I just didn't have a market for that.
Yeah, and that's tough. You're kind of fighting this uphill battle where there's so much mass essentially that says all we want or all we know as beer is this light lager. It was really, like you said, the same way in the United States until the mid '80s, and you have this long tradition of German lagers in China like Snow and Tsingtao, which is probably what most people in the U.S. know. Because it's exported in Snow, they don't export Snow,
absolutely.
right? So it's like, so when you think about like traditional Chinese beer culture, is there any traditional Chinese beer culture other than what was influenced by kind of the German and Czech and Polish folks that moved and lived in China?
Not necessarily in beer specifically, in other alcoholic drinks for sure. Mm-hmm. That's kind of where I took some of my inspiration from stuff like baijiu, which translates into white alcohol. It's hard, it's kind of like, I guess, vodka, but it's a weird, funky type of vodka, about 65%.
Is it from rice, fermented from rice?
No, it's not. Well, some of it is. So there's this, that's mostly fermented from red sorghum. And sorghum and rice and some barley, and everybody has their own different ways of brewing it, but sorghum is the main ingredient for that. And it's actually a really cool process how they do it. It is spontaneously fermented, kind of. So they have something called a jiuqiu, which is yeast. They get grain and they put it in a square like a brick, and they sit it in a barn for it to be naturally inoculated by yeast and bacteria, and they use that to ferment their wort, but it's all in a solid state fermentation. So everything's all in there together. There's no liquid like we do when we brew. It's the rice, it's the sorghum, it's everything all together, and they ferment that. And then they
wait. There's no liquid. It's not like in like a mash. There's no
well,
liquid.
it's kind of like a mash, but it's all like solid. Everything's in there. It's fermenting and mashing all at the same time.
So it's kind of like how sake is made, where you have the grains and you have this co-parallel fermentation with the koji and the yeast. Okay.
It's the same. It's very, very, very similar. So it's doing that same thing, but at the end of fermentation, they distill it with steam, and they steam this mash, and they get clear alcohol. And this clear alcohol, it's crazy high percentage. So they cut it and they put it in clay pots and bury it underground for years.
To let it mature and kind of balance out a little bit.
Well, the cool thing about clay, it's used in a lot of sour breweries, and even recently in places like Cantillon in Belgium and stuff like that. So it removes a lot of impurities from the hard alcohol, but it also imparts some types of minerals and that kind of flavor. And the longer you age it, got stuff that's 30 years old, selling for $3,000 a bottle, $300 a bottle. I'm sorry.
That's a crazy thing to think of. You think about wood, right? You think about oak barrels as this vessel that's going to add more flavor and kind of allow it to breathe and help it mature and age in its own way.
Yeah.
I've never thought about a clay vessel as adding flavor, but I mean, it makes sense, right? It's minerals kind of working their way into the beer.
Yeah, it makes it really pairs well with sour beers, I think, because think about a Goza. Goza has a lot of that minerality and the salinity from the salt, but you also get that from the clay pot too.
Yeah.
So I wanted to do some experimentation with some clay, but it's hard to get those shipped all the way from China.
And have them not break.
And have them not break, yeah.
Yeah. You'll just have to throw your own, I guess.
Yeah, I guess you start
in your spare time when you're not opening a brewery.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Right. Yeah. So you're trying to draw some inspiration to sort of make a connection for people, right? To say, okay, this is craft beer, this is new, there's different ingredients, but you can kind of draw a parallel between something else that they're used to get them excited about it or interested.
Right. Yeah. So using the tea really helped kind of bridge that gap.
Yeah.
And show people, okay, you can have a decent beer and you can have tea.
And this is in China.
This is in China.
This is not in Denver.
Right. This is in China.
Is when you're in China.
The culture is a lot different. So, they're outside drinking drinking tea in the middle of the day, just like we're outside on the patio drinking beers.
Right.
They think of it. Tea is a very, very important thing for them, and it has health benefits from all of the different things, from your blood pressure, your gut health, and that kind of stuff. And it's really pretty cool to try to utilize those teas in beers, and you get some cool flavors, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, teas, I mean, we talked about it a little before the show, but tea is so diverse. You have green tea, you have black tea, but there's a ton of varieties of those two categories. And then you kind of have herbal teas, which are all these other floral elements built into that base.
Right.
Or sometimes even on their own without any caffeine or tea.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and many of which don't even have tea in them.
Right, just the floral
flowers,
elements, just flowers.
Yeah, they do that a lot in China too. They have just flower teas. They'll do it just jasmine, or another flower is called guihua, which is a sweet osmanthus, and they put it with a little bit of sugar and lemon and goji berries, and that's a really nice, easy summer drink, kind of like a lemonade or something like that.
Yeah,
it's pretty cool.
So so you're saying the culture is sort of different. I mean, what was your experience of kind of the Chinese drinking culture when you were over there? It's Friday night. Everyone punches out at 5:00 and goes to the bar and has a couple of pints, or
so think of it how you are in college. You just turned 21, and this is how everybody drinks out there. It's binge drinking. It's drinking an immense amount of baijiu and beer and wine and all kinds of stuff. And a lot of it has to do with China has a very a masculine culture. It's I want to drink more than you. I'm going to drink more than you, and I'm the last guy standing. And that's how they communicate. That's how they, build relationships with each other.
Right.
It's not just I'm going to go have one or two beers. I'm going to drink until I'm drunk. My wife has to come pick me up. It's like that. So it's really kind of shocking to see that. Even businessmen, they come in suits and they're just sloshed by the end of the night.
So it seems tough because you have this, let's say a culture of binge drinking, right? Mm-hmm. And you're trying to make this artisanal, well-balanced product that people want to sit down and enjoy the flavor of, more like how they think about tea. How do you bridge that gap even though it's an alcoholic product?
Well, see, that was very difficult. It became where I would brew these beers. I would spend all this time doing them and say, I try this. And they love it. But then they would drink, 15 of those, or all their buddies would come in and order.
Great for a business model. What you're talking about.
Yeah, we made all kinds of money doing that, but it's hard to really, sit down and explain, okay, I did this, this, and this. And some of them would listen, but other ones, like, yeah, it tastes good, it gets me drunk. They want the highest alcohol, highest flavor, most bitter, strongest manly beer.
Right.
And, there is a growing craft beer culture in China. So we were the first brewery to open up in Huzhou, and it's a small town of 1 million people. But since I left 2 years ago, there popped up at least 5 more breweries and a couple other tap rooms, and there's a growing culture of craft beer there. And they got stuff people are importing from America. You can see the tap rooms have Treehouse and Casey and
really?
all these stuff. Yeah, and they're just desperate for really good beer, because as soon as they figured out that this beer is better than what they're used to be drinking,
Right.
it's just they love it more than we do.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Huh.
I don't know about that. We'll see.
Yeah.
But it's pretty cool. So I think as time goes on, you'll see a lot more experimentation coming from local Chinese breweries that are popping up. Because in the past, it was always an expat, American expat, or a Canadian expat going to China and opening up a brewery out there. Now there's more Chinese-operated breweries brewing stuff they're mimicking our styles, but they are using some of the local ingredients to do some cool stuff.
Well, it's kind of an exciting time to be a part of a growing industry, right? It's just starting to gain some traction. The kind of consumer is starting to gain some understanding and be a little more educated about the product, and all of a sudden you have a lot of natives starting to develop their own styles, which is a fun time to kind of see where it goes.
Yeah, it really is. It's really cool to see that. And I've seen people brewing, hazy IPAs. I've seen some people doing some mixed culture sours in some of the bigger cities, and it's really cool to see that and see their culture being imprinted on these beers. And that's kind of what I'm trying to do with Jade Mountain as well, is kind of incorporate, our American brewing traditions with Chinese culture as well. And that's why we brew the beers the way we do it. And we name our beers a certain way, and we brew with certain ingredients to try to have a connection with that culture.
Yeah.
There's 5,000 years of culture in China.
Yeah, that's a lot of recipes.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff to do.
So tell us a little bit about this beer that we're drinking right now. This is a lager brewed with jasmine.
This is a rice lager brewed with jasmine. I brewed this beer. This beer is called Snow. I called this beer this name.
It's not copyrighted?
Well, see, that's the thing. They call it snow. That was the thing. They called, in Chinese, it's shui hua, which is snowflake. So it's a little bit different. But I named this beer after the first tea that I had when I went to China. So there's a tea called Bi Tan Piao Shui, which means the snow falling on the green lake. And I just imagine the jasmine. The jasmine floats inside the teacup with the tea, and it's just a really beautiful floral tea. And I really wanted to try to incorporate that same flavor and aromatics in this particular beer. So we brewed this one with fresh jasmine flowers and rice and light lager.
Yeah.
It's super easy drinking, and it's got that really bright, kind of like Andrew was saying, that almost like floral melony. I get a little bit of kind of almost like pear skin from it, but it's really light and easy drinking, but also pretty refreshing. I'm guessing because of the rice. I don't know how much percentage-wise it was of the fermentables, but it helps dry it out a bit.
Yeah, that's exactly what we're going for. Dry, easy drinking beer, kind of like maybe an Asahi or a Tsingtao or something like that. So we use Sriracha Ace hops in these ones. Sriracha Ace is the ones used for Sapporo. We wanted something that really complements the flavor but doesn't overpower it, and I think that really does well with the jasmine. And it's nice, easy drinking beer. So this is one we'll be doing quite a bit.
That's really nice. Yeah, I'm looking forward to drinking more of that.
Yeah.
At the end of next month or beginning of September when you're open.
Yeah.
I'm curious, what the process of brewing beer in China is like for a microbrewer.
Oh,
right? We live in pretty amazing times as brewers in the United States, right? It was like, we want to brew a sati. Let me just order the Norwegian ale yeast, and I'll get these fresh juniper berries from Brewers Supply Group, and I'll get I'll import Viking malt, and it takes like 90 minutes maybe of ordering, and then you have this very sort of authentic, right, sati. And I'm imagining that in other places that don't have this long tradition, that maybe that's a little more difficult.
It's extremely difficult. China doesn't have any. You can't just go down to the store, to the brewing supply store, and buy whatever you need. I had to import grain from Belgium. I had to import hops from New Zealand, and carry yeast in my bag from White Labs into the airport across the plane to ferment my beer with. And it was really difficult to try to get any type of special ingredients to use. So I had to be pretty creative with what I had. I couldn't get a lot of different styles of yeast or hops, and the stuff that I had it wasn't very fresh because I'm importing it from there. It's 6 months old, so my attenuation wasn't that good. The yeast sometimes wouldn't do very well. The problem is also China's air quality is really bad, especially where we were. So it doesn't even matter how well you clean your equipment. There is inevitably, some type of inoculation, contamination from just being in where you're at. Yeah. And it's really hard to deal with that. But, it makes you a better brewer, I think, kind of using the things that you have and trying to make what you can. And like the system that I brewed on, I just repurposed some water heating tanks and just kind of piped it ourselves and kind of built everything very homebrew style. And it worked. It brewed some pretty okay beer, but it wasn't easy by far.
Yeah, it adds a whole new level, right? Because you're trying to change like the paradigm of what people think of as craft beer. You're trying to make these interesting beers, and at the same time, you're trying to just make beer in general, which in and of itself is like a whole mountain to climb. But you're like, I'm going to climb 3 mountains at the same time, just because I think it would be better.
Yeah.
And I think it's a challenge, and I think I think we're kind of spoiled in the U.S. and in Colorado, especially where you have this great access to ingredients like Andrew's talking about. You have amazing equipment, and you have a community of other brewers doing the same thing that you can go to.
Right.
How is it when you're kind of on an island by yourself? What are some challenges that you could come up with?
You really are by yourself. Even though there are breweries out there was some craft breweries when I was out there, the culture is not collaborative like it is here. Right. It's very secretive. It says, this is my recipe, and I'm not going to share it with you because this is the way I make money or whatever. They have that thought about everything out there in China, and it's kind of unfortunate, but I didn't do it that way. If a new brewery coming up and they ask me, hey, how do you brew an IPA? And I say, here's my recipe. Go ahead and try it and brew it. Because it's not just me that I don't want just me to succeed. I want everybody to succeed because, rising tide raises all boats, right? And it just increases the knowledge for everybody that's out there. And you just really have to have a passion for what you're doing. Otherwise, it's really, really hard to do it by yourself with no access to anything.
Yeah. When I say you've got to be a procedural engineer and a plumber, an electrician.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a brewer.
I think the thing with brewing, too, that a lot of people don't realize as much is like recipes. Recipes are important, but like process and procedure has much more of an impact on the final beer than me telling you I used 20 pounds of Pilsner malt in this 10-gallon batch of beer and this type of hop. That doesn't get you too far if you don't know how to brew technically.
Exactly. Right? That's the hardest part of the technical aspect of it.
But I feel like in some ways it could be nice, right? Like this jasmine lager. And then we should try something else that you brought on here. But this jasmine lager, right? Like it's the keynote is the jasmine, right? And I feel like sometimes in Colorado we get carried away where they're like, I'm going to use this crazy yeast and this crazy new experimental hop and this new Pilsner malt from the local maltster down the street, and I'm going to use all the great ingredients in one beer, and it's going to be like this crazy complex or muddled thing where it's like this gives you the opportunity to this is the malt I have to work with, this is the yeast I have to work with. Right, so the thing that I can control is the jasmine, it's the herbs, it's the spices, it's the teas.
I really wanted to create beers that were simple but also easy drinking. I want something that's approachable. I don't want to brew, a beer with all these wild ingredients like you're saying, because it'll get lost. The jasmine flavor will get lost in if you put anything else with it. It's a very, very delicate flavor, I think. Brewing in an IPA, I've had some jasmine IPAs and they're all right, but I think having a lager like this really, puts it front forward, and it's kind of pretty cool. I think so.
Yeah. I like the idea too of focusing on on high quality but a few ingredients. There's a couple food dishes that kind of epitomize this. Like you think about like having a caprese salad with like really, really ripe tomatoes and basil and mozzarella and good olive oil, and that's it. And it's amazing if all the ingredients are really good.
Right.
And so focusing on sort of one thing instead of trying to muddle together. And then in 10 minutes, I'll tell you about my Chinese-inspired beer that has 45 ingredients. But for now, I'm going to talk about this.
Well, I'm not saying it one way is better than the other. I'm just saying I think sometimes it's nice to have that opportunity. Like I almost think about it like when breweries do like a smash beer or something where it's like I really want to know what this malt and hop combination is like together. Right. Maybe it influences what you do now that you have access to.
Yeah, it really does.
All these ingredients.
Even though I have all this access.
Yeah.
I'm still pretty narrow with the things I'm using. I'm still kind of using the way I brewed out in China. Of course, it's better ingredients, better yeast and everything. But I still want to keep that simplicity, throughout the beers.
Yeah.
So most of our beers either have no added ingredients or there's one or two. Like our next beer I kind of want to try is our sour.
Let's do it. Let's drink it, yeah.
Sure. This one is, I call it Confucius. Confucius.
Sounds like a philosophical beer.
It is. And there's a reason why we call it that way. There's always a reason for everything that we're doing.
After the show, we're just going to sit around and pontificate about life's complexities.
I've been looking for some pontification, and I'm glad, I don't know if that's a word, I'm glad that we can spend the rest of our Monday working on that. So you were telling us a little bit about this beer before the show. This is a kettle soured beer.
This is a kettle sour with plum and vanilla.
Plum and vanilla. That sounds great. It's got a cool color to it.
Not enough plums. We need more plum beers.
That's what I was wondering too. I was looking it up and I was like, wow, there's not very many people using plums in beers. And plum is a really popular ingredient in all throughout Chinese history. So the plum blossom is used in everything from beauty products to food to alcohol. It's used for lots of different health benefits, but in Confucianism, it represents virtue and strength because the plum blossom blooms in the winter, at the end of winter. And it's really a beautiful flower because it's on a tree with no leaves and the flowers bloom by themselves. And the tree is just all around is snow. And it's just a beautiful, really inspiring flower that has inspired people like Confucius and other poets and different types of things like that. And it really inspired me to use this fruit in this beer, and I wanted to try to get that.
I like the idea of conveying that story and that history through a beer, right? You could just put this on the menu and be like, this is a plum Berliner Weiss or whatever you want to call it, right? But I like that it has that kind of backstory, and you get to learn a little bit about the history and the culture through the beer.
Right. Yeah, I really wanted to make sure all of the beers had some connection to it, to the Chinese culture, a story or a name or a flower or fruit. And I think this one really exemplifies that. There's a lot of culture and history in just one flower, this meihua and plums.
Yeah, the nose is great. The plum is very prominent. It's not real tart, which I like. And the vanilla just kind of helps smooth it out. Do you use fresh plums or?
Yeah, just a plum puree, fresh plum puree, and then vanilla beans.
Yeah.
Nice. It tastes very wheat forward. I'm assuming there's some wheat in it.
There's a little bit of wheat, yeah.
A little bit of wheat in it. It reminds me like a bit of a Berliner Weiss, where you would order the Berliner Weiss with the shot of like raspberry. It almost reminds me of like a Berliner Weiss that you would order with some like plum instead.
Yeah, that's really nice.
Yeah, easy drink beer, not too sour.
Yeah.
Well, I like this too. Like, you're telling the story, but also like playing with expectations, right? Like plum is a word that we often use with beer, like usually aged beer, like big beers, old ales, Russian Imperial Stouts, these huge malty 3-year-old beers, barley wines, old crustacean or something gets some like plum character to it after it's been aged for a while. But I like, taking this like very light, like slightly tart Berliner Weiss style and like putting that plum in there and sort of changing the expectations. I like the white stouts that were, We saw some for a while. Like, it's just a neat idea, I think, to like sort of messes with people's brains in an interesting way, to be like, this beer is yellow and it tastes like chocolate and roast.
Right.
It's just kind of it's fun to do that. I think, it sounds like you'll have an opportunity to do that quite a bit.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah, there's a lot of really cool things I want to experiment with, and these are just a few of the ones that we're going to have when we open up next month or later on.
Yeah, and I don't think we mentioned yet exactly where the brewery is going to be. Do you want to let everyone know where to check it out?
We are on Evans in Quebec. That's the closest cross streets from there.
Evans in Quebec.
Hey, Jay here. So I have a question for all the brewers on the show, but Evans in Quebec, so that's over there by they put a Popeyes over there.
They just put the Popeyes, yes.
Right. So where are you at in relation to the Big Lots and the Popeye? Is it in that strip mall?
So it's right behind there. So that street right there is Quebec, and there's another street called Jewel, which is right down the street from there. So it's Quebec and Jewel right there. So it's right behind in the kind of industrial area. You got the Denver Dumpheads League.
Yeah.
And it's just right down there and turn right.
Oh, okay. Because I used to live over there. I used to work at the little cheesesteak place.
I was wondering why you
knew.
I
love that
was wondering why you knew so much about the area. You really know the geography well.
He loves Popeyes.
I was like, you must be a Popeyes fan. This guy loves Popeyes.
No, first of all, I've never eaten at a Popeyes, and I have a story that can go with that, but that's not for today. But here's my question, because as I do the show with you guys every week on Beercraft, and I hear you talk about all the ingredients that goes into things, and this tastes good and that, I want to hear from Sean first, and then you two guys, whenever you go. But I want to know where, and not where like what the brewery was, but where were you on Earth when you had the most disgusting beer you've ever tried, and what was in it that you think that you didn't like, and then same thing with you guys, the grossest beer that you've ever had, and you don't have to name names of who made it, but kind of what was in it and why you think it went that wrong.
So Jeff once brewed this beer.
Yeah, I was at Intrepid Sojourner like last night.
Yeah, speaking
that's
of
the end of Beercraft, everybody.
That's a really hard question. Like, I'm sitting here trying to rack my brain about.
Just pick one that you thought was
gross. We can throw
gross.
Sean under the bus.
Yeah, let's throw Sean under the bus.
Let him go first.
So I think the worst beer that I could think of was around the Kentucky Derby. So they had trying to do like a Moscow Mule style beer, with the mint and the lime and the kind of like the bourbon flavor, and I don't know, something about it. It was just completely wrong for me. Everything about it, the mint and the flavors with it, I couldn't finish it. And I can usually finish most beers. It's just one of those beers that that was just.
I think it's like that moment of Chinese culture coming through there. It's like, I can finish the beers. Like, I can drink a lot of it. But
not this time.
So you were actually at the Kentucky Derby?
No. I was
like at a Kentucky Derby party?
I was at a tap house.
A tap house. Okay. So you know who it was in your head.
I know who it was. I know who it was.
Jeff.
Man,
all right, Andrew.
Oh man, one beer comes to mind. It was and it was just sort of like you said, just kind of a mismatch in flavors, right? Where they had made an English mild, so this kind of like light, slightly malty, low ABV, sort of easy drinking, low carbonated beer. Then they had added lavender to it, and it's a great flavor. We make a lavender beer, but the two, like the English mild style and the lavender just didn't go together, and it just ended up being kind of muddled and sort of thick tasting and like overly floral. Like, lavender is hard because if you use too much of it, it tastes like hand soap.
Yeah.
And then so it's just a total like mismatch of flavor profiles. It felt like.
I mean, it kind of goes back to what we were talking about with simplifying what you're trying to do. Both of the beers, and this is my escape from not answering Jay's
question. I was
just
going to say, man, you don't get off the hook. I'm not asking you to be like, well, you guys know Carl Jones down at Jones Brewery.
I get that. I just want to make a point because I think it's important. Like we talked earlier about sort of focusing on one thing, right? Focusing on just the jasmine or just the plum, and I think that's an important lesson is that not everything has to be this brand new flavor combination, because you can hit the mark. You can hit the mark sometimes. You can miss the mark sometimes. But being able to highlight really cool ingredients in a very simple way, I think, gets overlooked a lot, especially in a place like Colorado, where we are, where there's so many breweries doing so many things all the time. Sometimes you feel like you have to do crazy stuff to stand out.
Well, I was just going to say, can I ask a follow-up question, which was going to be, do you guys think that brewers are trying to do too much with their menu and with what they're offering in order to set themselves apart from all the breweries that are here locally in Colorado? Do you think they're going, or do you think they're reaching to where more brewers should be like, let's just go back to the basics, make a good thing? Do you think too many breweries are going outside the box to be like, I want to put Skittles and Captain Crunch into mine, because and the thought of doing that isn't, I just want to make something really unique that nobody's had before. The thought going into that is, I have to do something so that I'm different because there's so much beer.
I mean, there are people doing that. There are people putting cereal and candy into beer.
Well, the guys from the Bill and Ashley from Bierstadt Lagerhaus in Germany last week were telling us about a beer that had catnip in it.
Catnip.
Oh my God!
In the beer, like, that's too far. I'll agree with them on that.
Well, but so here's the thing. I mean, we're a biased panel, right? We all put lots of different things in beer, but I mean, I think, Jay, like, the short answer is no, right? I think.
You think people are doing it, but it's a small number, and
sure,
the ones that
sometimes it's probably a gag, right? And like, look at this. I mean, I remember
novelty something.
I remember reading about a beer that I don't remember the breweries on the East Coast. The beer was called fried chicken, right? And they put some pieces of fried chicken in the mash, and it was like 2 pieces of fried chicken and like 20 barrels of beer.
Yeah,
and like, maybe it's delicious beer. But it's clearly like a marketing
gimmick,
stunt. But at the end of the day, like, I mean, I think Jeff would probably agree. It's like there's a whole culinary world that beer is just beginning to break into, and some of that stuff is not going to taste good. And on some level, I think we as brewers and as consumers of craft beer need to allow for the fact that some of the times it's
a miss.
It's a miss, right? And
I think
we've got to go there. We've got to have some of the experimentation. We've got to try it to know what's amiss and what's not. And
I think part of it's experimentation, and part of it is like you kind of said earlier, that sort of attention grab or nostalgic play where you're like, oh, I remember Fruity Pebbles growing up. Let's make a Fruity Pebbles beer.
Yeah,
maybe I'll do that.
But I think for a lot of people, and I would speak for Sean, but something you were saying earlier is I want to bring these impressions of Chinese culture to Denver, to Colorado, right? You must want to do that really badly because there's 4,000 breweries here. And but I think that's important. So part of it is too the story that comes with those beers. It's not just I put jasmine in the beer because I thought it would taste good, right? It's like what you're talking about with the plum blossoms in Confucius and the cultural history with the plum flower in China. There's a story there that needs to be told. You're the beer artist. You're going to tell it through the beer, and it's a pretty tasty story.
Yeah, I think it's really important to specialize. I know there's a lot of breweries doing a lot of wild stuff out there, but I think, especially recently, people's flavors have been changing. I think even the beer consumers in Denver have been changing what they've been drinking. It's, at least me anyway, I've been going from these heavy, beers to light lagers, like Bierstadt's my favorite slow pour pills right there.
Right.
So I like those beers that, it's simple, easy drinking, but it also has something else to it too. I like, even if it's just a story that connects to the beer itself, why we brewed that beer. There has to be something else to it, not just, hey, this is a good beer, because look, all the breweries here in Denver, all the beers you have access to, there's a lot of really good beers out there, but there has to be something where it sets you, at least your beer, a little bit apart. You're specializing, you're having, your story being told through that beer.
And I think you're doing a good job of kind of telling that story through your beer. The guys at Bierstadt Lagerhaus are doing a great job of sharing authentically brewed, technically excellent German beer, 23-hour brew days, and that's after they shaved 3 hours off to make it more efficient, you know. And then we kind of talked to the guys at Brews who are really taking that artistic Belgian approach to making Belgian beer. Yeah, kind of pulling that tradition. I love that, and you know, I love to do that kind of stuff with Spice Trade too. We have a beer, which when it comes out, I'm going to get you some of it. It's our Szechuan Saison. So we brew it I guess it gets released in September, but it's a Saison. So it's a French-style Saison. We brew it with Chinese 5-spice, Szechuan peppercorns, and orange peel.
Oh, sounds great.
Yeah, and it's a cool blend. You know, I always kind of love to, I mean, it's like you're doing a whole brewery about the nuances and kind of the details of Chinese beer, and I have one beer that kind of tries to lump it all together into one, but it's a culinary flavor profile that's fairly common, that combination of ingredients. It tells the story, and it links to the culinary world a little bit with the Szechuan peppercorn.
Oh, God, I love those.
They're so cool, aren't they?
They're so good. That's such a huge flavor in China. It's they call it ma, which is numbing flavor.
Yeah.
And they pair it with the spice.
Yeah, it's
too.
like the yin and yang. It's the balance of the spice.
Yeah, it's amazing flavor they put in there's certain areas in China and in Sichuan province of China is where they really focus on that flavor profile, and it's just amazing. Super spicy, but
yeah, the food is super spicy, and that's the thing that I love about the Szechuan peppercorns is that people hear it and they're like, "Ooh, I don't know if I want spice in my beer." And I'm like, "Well, the Szechuan peppercorns are actually not spicy at all.
It's the numbing.
Yeah. It numbs your taste buds, so you can eat more spicy food." And so we always try to pair it with spicy foods at the restaurant and when we do beer dinners. But the peppercorns themselves have a really cool flavor. It's like, it's almost like it's hard to explain. You know, it's like it smells and tastes kind of like peppercorns, like normal pepper, but more citrusy than that. And then the mouth numbing is really the primary component.
Right. Yeah, that's such a strange sensation if you've never experienced it. It's just really shocking at first. It's like, what's wrong with my mouth?
Right. Yeah, the first time I brewed with them, I was like, oh, let me eat a couple and see what they taste like, because that's what I do with most of the ingredients. And I eat them, I start chewing on them, like, all of a sudden my mouth starts just salivating and just going numb, and I'm like, oh no, I've made a terrible mistake, you know. And now when I have people come in and I'm like, try this pepper, I'm like, try one peppercorn, chew on it for like 30 seconds, and then spit it out, because otherwise it's going to be too much.
Right.
Yeah. So, well, I know we're getting a little bit short on time here. I want to crack in a couple of these IPAs that you brought too.
Absolutely. We can go into, this one is called Silk Road.
Okay.
Cool.
And this one is pretty cool. I mean, there's no strange flavors in there. This is just a normal IPA. But we do have some.
Dump anything out.
So there's a lot of hops that you have access to here.
Yeah, these hops for this one is Citra, Nelson, Galaxy.
So real cheap, real easy to find, no problems there.
Easier ones. So
those are some great hops. I'm
Any of those
excited to
glasses.
see how this
Yeah, I'm not dumping this out.
this tastes.
So you're in China. You've got a brewery. People are buying, 15 liters at a time and getting smashed at the brewery. And you're like, you know what? I don't like selling 15 liters at a time. I'm going to Denver, and I'm going to open a brewery in one of the most crowded, competitive craft beer markets in the country. What brought you back from China?
Well, Denver's my hometown, so it wasn't a choice to which city to come back to, but I felt that Denver was a place where I could really stretch my experimental ideas, I guess. And this was some place where I felt that people could appreciate the flavors and that I could show through beer, and they can analyze it and drink it, and they understand it. And I got to a point where in China I couldn't grow more than I was. I was in a small, maybe 200 square foot space and brewing 10 gallons at a time. And it was really fun and I liked doing it, but I came to a point where I couldn't get any bigger because of laws and, money and all that kind of stuff. So I had one of my friends, he wanted to learn how to brew. So I taught him how to brew, and he took over for me, and he started brewing and took over the space out there, and I had a chance to come back out here and do something bigger and more to really explore all the flavors that I wanted to explore. So that's why we did that.
Yeah. So I'm curious just to follow up on some of your questions. Like, you mentioned the law. It's like, is it easier to brew beer in China? Is it harder to brew beer in China?
So for me, I didn't have a license to brew out there. I just kind of knew a couple of people. China, it's all about your relationships you have with everybody. So I was pretty good friends with the local police chief and some of the...
You could drink more than they could.
They just really appreciated that they can come to a place that was small, special, different, and had something that they'd never had before. And they like to bring all their friends there, and they just became a local gathering place for all these people. And they said, don't ever worry about your license. We're never going to shut you down. So it was cool to do it that way. I didn't have to go through all of the hurdles we do here. I could just open it up. There we go. Brew a beer, start selling. And it was pretty cool. But in order to really grow and get bigger, you have to go through a lot more complex laws when it comes to brewing on a commercial scale. Bottling beer, you have to be able to bottle, I think it's some immense number, like 100,000 bottles an hour or something crazy.
So there's like a number of bottles per hour regulation that you have to be able to hit to expand.
Well, you have to do that, but you also have to have Chinese local investors to invest into your company, and you have to have go through all these different hurdles, and nothing's very transparent there, and everything's in Chinese, so it's really hard to do more. It's getting a little bit better now with some of the local craft breweries popping up, but it just doesn't make it easier for just a small guy to start a brewery.
Are most of the craft craft breweries that are popping up, are they mostly Chinese owned, or are they people like yourself from the U.S. or Germany?
The better brewed, or the more popular ones are mostly expats opening up their own tap rooms, but there's quite a few that are opening up that we never even hear about because China has its own internet basically, and their own social media, their own different things that they advertise, and we don't have any access to that. So the only ones we get to see is just the ones in the major cities like Beijing, and Shanghai, and Hong Kong. So it just really, it's growing, and I see it growing, and it's crazy. But I think there's only maybe 200 breweries in the whole country.
Wow.
So it's getting there, but
200 breweries in the whole country.
Like
how many breweries?
There's more in Denver.
Right, I was gonna say like in
more in the state of Colorado.
The state of Colorado, there's almost 400 breweries.
Yeah.
And you're talking about a massive country with what is it? Twice the population.
4 times the population.
4 times the population of the United States.
Yeah, it's amazing. It really is. It's just the sheer size of it. You're going to see some really cool stuff coming out of China here pretty soon, I think, and people are just going to see some cool stuff. I'm excited about it.
Are there international collaborations in your
There
future?
is. There was one from Cerebral did a collaboration with a brewery in Hong Kong called Young Master. And those guys are probably some of my favorite breweries in China. So 2 of my favorite breweries. So it really, some people are really starting to do stuff. And there's a brewery in Beijing that did a collaboration with Black Project out here. So it's some people are starting to do some stuff, and we're probably going to do some collaborations eventually.
Nice.
Yeah.
Gotta get open first, and you're almost there. You got a month left.
Yeah.
No
still
date
there.
yet.
No date. I don't want to put a hard date because things come and go, and time. I thought we were going to open up last year, and just we've been building everything ourselves. We didn't take any loans, we didn't hire any contractors. We're just building everything ourselves slowly and brewing the beers as we go, and trying to hone in our recipes and our styles and our flavors. And things have changed, even since last year. Just the flavors and the direction that I'm kind of focusing on is just kind of coming like this, and I feel a lot happier waiting longer to open up because we're not, we don't have to go and start making money right away. We're not trying to do that. We just want to focus on making really good beer and portraying that culture aspect.
Hey, let me ask you this before you guys finish up. How much money do you have? you know what I mean? Like, I'm not the smartest man in the world, but I know it takes money to open a brewery.
There's a reason why it's taken 2 years.
I mean, well, good for you and putting in the hard work, man. And I'll tell you what, I'm somebody that even though I don't drink, and I know that's terrible because of the beer show and everything, but I'm excited for you, because we followed you a little bit since back in the day with Intrepid. So it's exciting to see you each time we interact, whether it's Beer Craft or the Modern Eaters. So I'm excited, man. And I wish you all the luck in the world.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, I think there's something to be said, too, for being able to have the time, however that ends up coming into play, but having the time to really develop your flavors and recipes without having to feel rushed. You can really kind of come out of the gate with some things that you're proud of, some things you're excited about that are a little more well-refined.
And it helps because we're just on one barrel system too. So it's a lot of brewing, but it allows me to really experiment. And if something doesn't taste good, I just throw it down the drain. It's just a one barrel. It's a lot easier to do it that way.
Yeah.
And, so it's a lot of flexibility with that.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, well, that's cool. Well, Sean, thanks so much for coming on the show. I always like talking to you. I'm always super impressed by your story. I think anybody who can go somewhere else like China and open a brewery and be successful and bring his experience back, that's such an inspiring story, and I'm looking forward to the beer and learning a lot more about Chinese culture as these different beers come out. And so I'm sure we'll have to have you back on the show when Jade Mountain is up and running, and I'll have to try some more beers and talk some more Chinese beer. But in the meantime, good luck, and then, thanks so much.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're wrapping up our show, but we're going to be back here next week from another mystery country somewhere else in the world.
It's like that Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego game.
What
Did you ever play
a
that?
great show.
I'm gonna work on Chaluna and Javi and getting him out of the emergency room and get him over.
Yeah. He doesn't need to be in the ER.
He's
you
working.
wanted to keep it a secret? Is that what it was?
Well, now the mystery's
Well,
gone.
listen, man, he's too busy for me, so it won't be him. In case it's him, but unless it's him.
Though.
But honestly, Where in the World is that Carmen Sandiego has stolen Niagara Falls. And you're like, how did that happen?
Just gotta
It's a
figure
big
it out.
helicopter. Anyway, we'll be back somewhere else in the world without Carmen Sandiego next Monday at 4 o'clock.